getting cancer. Then the very strong risk factors have to do with family history of breast cancer in 3 or more relatives, or bilateral breast cancer in a premenopausal relative. So you have someone who is in the family and had breast cancer in both breasts. That's bilateral breast cancer, and the person has not reached menopause. Now that is a strong risk factor that you should get yourself checked. Now we also have a mutation has been found to put people at risk of getting breast cancer. So if you are diagnosed, or if that mutation is found in your gene, then you are at risk. There's a Jewish lineage called the Ashkenazi lineage, and they have a number of mutations. The Ashkenazi Jewish lineage, BRCA1, BRCA2 mutation. So for this group of people, they are said to have a higher risk of having breast cancer. So the others, personal history of LCIS, hyperplasia, atypical hyperplasia, and breast density greater than 75%. All these put you at risk of having breast cancer. Now let's look at how to perform a self-breast exam. Now for breast cancer screening, we have 4 main methods that are used to detect breast cancer. Now, the first one is self-breast examination. Then we have the clinical breast examination, the use of an ultrasound, and then a mammography. For the clinical breast examination, the ultrasound and the mammography, these you cannot do by yourself. You need to go to a health facility to be examined by an expert. So I'm not going to touch on those. But for the self-breast examination, these you can do by yourself. So how do you go about performing the self-breast examination? Now, first of all, in the shower, when you are taking a shower, now you can use your fingers to check your entire breast and also your armpit area. So you press down lightly, you increase the pressure a bit, and then you apply firm pressure to check if there is any lump, if a part of your breast has become thick, if there is a knot there, or if there are any other changes that were not there before. So you check both your breast and your armpit. Now there are some people who have lumps or in their armpits. That is not what we are talking about. We are talking about something that was not there initially, and then you suddenly saw it appear. You need to have it checked. Secondly, when you stand in front of a mirror, you can visually inspect your breasts with your arms at your side. So you check to see whether it looks okay. Then you raise your arms over your head and look for any changes that may have occurred in the breast. So you are checking for any swelling or any dimpling. Dimpling is like your breast looks like how I'm trying to find the simplest English word for dimpling. So when we say that your breast skin is dimpling, that means that the texture of the skin on the breast is not smooth. So it's no longer smooth. Certain changes in the skin that is on your breast. So if you see that, then you need to get a professional to check what is going on. Changes in the nipples. Maybe your nipples have inverted, they have gone inside. Or maybe you have nipples that are discharging when they should not. All these are signs that you need to get your breast checked properly. Now, when you do that, you can also rest your palm on your hips and then press firmly so that your chest muscles are flexed. Then you check your breasts, looking for any changes, particularly on one side. Now note that for most people, the two breasts do not have, or usually do not have, the same size. You might have some people having one breast larger than the other, so that is not alarming. But then if you see other changes in the nipple or skin or etc., those might call for attention. Now thirdly, when you lie down and you place a pillow under your right shoulder and your right arm, that is, we are checking your right breast. Place a pillow under your right shoulder and your right arm behind your head, and then using your left hand, you move your finger around your right breast gently until you cover the entire breast and your armpit. And then you apply pressure from light pressure to medium and then firm. After that, you squeeze the nipple a bit to check whether there are any discharges or any lumps in the nipple. And then you can do that also for the left breast. So these are the ways that by yourself you can be checking. You can do this anytime. I mean, you don't need any financial, you don't have any financial obligations to this. You can do this in your spare time, etc. So that if you find anything that is of concern, then you report to the nearest health center for attention. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grace. So now we'll be taking questions for 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Grace, please voice them out now. Or you can type your messages into the chat and then I'll read them out to everyone's hearing. Okay, so there's a question from Emmanuel Junior Hamenu, and it says, please, Dr. Grace, can breast cancer be prevented entirely? Dr. Grace, please, Emmanuel wants to know if breast cancer can be prevented entirely.
Well, entirely, I'm not sure it can be prevented entirely, but you can reduce the risk. because when you look at the risk factors, some of the risk factors have to do with family history. Now that you cannot change your family history. So if you are in a family that has a high risk of cancer, then the possibility that you can get it is high. But then you can live a healthy lifestyle, or if you are not living healthily, some lifestyle changes would help you to lower the risk of getting breast cancer. And some of them include limiting your alcohol intake. If you are someone who takes alcohol, limit it, because the more alcohol you drink, the greater your risk of developing breast cancer. And then we have maintaining a healthy weight. Obesity is one risk factor for developing breast cancer. So if your weight is not healthy, you would work on it. Physical activity is also important. If you're not physically active, you might want to be physically active to lower your risk of getting breast cancer. For women, breastfeeding has also been identified as playing a role in breast cancer prevention. They say that the longer you breastfeed, the greater the protective effect. So if you're a woman and you have a child, breastfeed them for as long as you can. So these are some of the ways that you can decrease the risk. But like I said, with total prevention, you can't do anything about some of the factors that put you at risk for breast cancer.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Grace. Please, Comfort also wants to know, can the size of someone's breast increase the chances of breast cancer? As in, some people have small sizes, others have big sizes. So does it put anyone at risk? Does it have any effect on someone's susceptibility to breast cancer?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, you can have a small breast. Like I said, breast cancer is not just found in women. It's found in men also. And a lot of men generally don't have large breasts. So the size of the breast doesn't really contribute to whether you would get breast cancer or not.
Rachel Edwards also wants to know, in case you find a lymph and you don't see any physical signs such as the dimpling and nipple discharge, could it also be a sign of breast cancer?
I want to believe that she meant lump instead of lymph, because your lymph nodes are part of your anatomy. But if you find a lump, it does not automatically mean that you have breast cancer. You could have a lump in your breast which is benign. It's not a cancerous lump. So in every case, you need to have a medical personnel check and then properly diagnose what you have. So not every lump you find in your breast is automatically a cancerous lump. And of course, finding a lump could be one of the could mean that you have cancer without the other symptoms such as dimpling or etc. So those ones could also show having a lump also. All the signs and symptoms don't automatically have to be in your breast to show that you have breast cancer. So if you find a lump, get it checked. If you find that the skin is dimpling, get it checked. If you find that your breast is discharging abnormally, get it checked.
Great. Ruth Olawole also wants to know whether hormonal therapy can affect gonadal hormones as a female, and if so, would it make the individual more masculine?
No, it wouldn't. when we talk about chemotherapy, of course, every kind of therapy that you take, there may be some side effects, etc. But hormonal therapy, they always have, how do I even put it? Specificity. If you are taking hormonal therapy to target cancer cells, it's different from taking hormonal cells to change your sex, as people do when they feel that they are a male stuck in a female body. The kind of hormones that you have to take to transition your body to another sex is different. So it's not going to change you from one sex into another, or for you to become more like another sex. The purpose of hormonal therapy in this case, to deal with the abnormal cells that that are in your body, and not to change your gonads or change your sex into something else.
All right. Dr. Kweli, please, if a lump is not cancerous, if a breast lump is not cancerous, then what other things could it possibly be? Dr. Grace, did you hear me? Dr. Grace?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I muted myself.
Okay. So I want to know that if a breast lump is not cancerous, then what other things could it possibly be?
So there are a number of breast lumps which can be in your breast but will not be cancerous. We have cysts. The cysts can be found in your breasts, and it would not be a cancerous lump. You can have certain health conditions where you have necrosis of the fatty tissues in your breast, and this could present themselves as a lump inside your breast, but it is not a cancerous lump. So a cyst is just like a sac that is filled with fluid. So this can develop in your breast tissue. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is a cancerous lump. And then we also have the fibroadenoma. These are solid, smooth, non-cancerous lumps. They are quite commonly found in women between the ages of 20 or in their 20s and 30s. Mostly seen also in postmenopausal women who are taking hormone therapy. Now, these are not cancerous lumps, but they can occur in the breast and they can be treated. So there's no cause for alarm. So that's why I said if you see a lump in your breast, it doesn't necessarily mean you have cancer. It could be any of these as well. So you need to have proper diagnosis.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, how do early menarche and late menopause contribute to breast cancer? How exactly does that happen?
Now, these are going to be due to the hormones. For early menarche, it has to do with estrogen. If you start menstruating early, that means that more estrogen is being produced, increasing your breast cell proliferation. Now, at that age, it could lead to a larger number of undifferentiated breast cells, because your mammary gland increases after menarche, and this could lead to putting you at risk of having breast cancer.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Grace. Now I would like to move on to Dr. Lily.
All right, let me share my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes, please.
All right. So I'd like to say, first of all, I'm having a raging sore throat. So I wouldn't sound as loud as I normally would. So, and if I start experiencing bouts of coughing, I guess it's because I'm talking. But can you hear me?
Yes, please.
All right. So I'm going to talk about breast cancer genetics and advocacy. Like Councillor Lutrot. Hey, was it Lutrot? No, wasn't it? Councillor.
Yes, it wasn't.
It was. I don't know. The councillor said, I'm a geneticist and I focus on cancers. So when talk about balanced life, with most living things, there's cell proliferation. Because a lot of times they start off as one cell, and there's also cell death. Now, when you zoom in on, the animal kingdom, overall, generally, they are short-lived. And most of the time, they are almost exclusively made up of most post-mitotic cells. Like I said, if you start off with one cell, you undergo several, an insane number of mitoses to, arrive at the whole organism. So you're almost exclusively made up of post-mitotic cells. Now, if you zoom in further to vertebrates, they are more longer lived, like us. And so there's substantial and continuous cell proliferation. And so there's certain times there's a need for, increased proliferation, maybe if you get hurt or something of that nature. And there are certain times where mutated cells are come into existence, and then somehow it has to be suppressed. So there's a balance to ensure that you have normal cells generally populating the organism you're dealing with. Now, what's cancer? When you pick a normal cell, they divide normally. When they are old or diseased or mutated, they respond to certain cues in the environment, and then they undergo apoptosis or they are killed off. Now, you can have certain cells that are considered abnormal. These cells, first of all, multiply abnormally. So there's increased proliferation over proliferation. Someone say hyperproliferation. Now, what happens then is these cells acquire novel characteristics, and then they start to grow much bigger. They breach the confines of where they originally start, and then they end up even developing their own, blood vessels. And the blood vessels supply oxygen and nutrients, so they're able to undergo increased angiogenesis, and then eventually they breach. Like I said already, they breach the original area where they are found, and then they invade surrounding tissue. Now, how does it spread? The term is metastasis. So these cells typically break away from the original tumor, and then they can enter the blood vessel or the lymph vessel, and then they can now travel to other parts of the body and then establish new tumors. So, for example, here you have a cancer which has developed typically from one cell that gains, becomes abnormal. They break the basal lamina, they invade capillaries, then they are moved, transported to distant areas where they invade and then establish and then create new tumors. That's why, and that's a key hallmark of cancers. When you talk about tumors, they have benign and malignant tumors. benign tumors are not cancers, but malignant tumors are. And one of the key characteristics is the fact that they're able to spread and then invade neighboring or even distant tissues and get established via, lymph and then blood vessels. Now we have over 200 types of cells in our bodies, and practically all of them can develop into cancers. So there are so many types of cancers. Even when you pick a particular tissue, you can have different types of cancers. And today we're going to focus on breast cancer. And like the name suggests, the cancer develops in the breast, and that's what you know as breast cancer. So this is the anatomy. Dr. Kelly mentioned these already. So it's basically fat tissue, and then you have the mammary glands. You have the lobes made up of the lobules that produce breast milk in, a breastfeeding female. And then these go through this duct and end up at the nipple. Now, typically, like Sheridan mentioned, most breast cancers will either develop in the tubules that carry the milk to the breast, to the nipple, or in the lobules. Now, why are we interested in breast cancer? When you look at the global breast cancer burden, it's staggering. For the first time in 2020, breast cancer surpassed lung cancer as the most diagnosed cancer in both sexes worldwide. Now, but it is the fourth when it comes to the ranking of the cancers that cause death. However, when you zoom into Africa, you still see it as the number one in females as well. But in most countries, it's the number in practically most countries in Africa is the number one cause of cancer-related deaths in women. You come to Ghana, it's no different. Breast cancer is the number one leading cancer in both sexes of all ages. Now, since 2020, our record system is not as robust. However, it's been observed that it's consistently increasing in Ghana. Now, what's the problem we're dealing with right now? It's a high mortality to incidence ratio. And when you look, you observe more developed countries, for example, the mortality rate is low. You see 17 thereabouts or lower thereabouts. But when you come to Ghana, you can see up to 50% of people end up dying from breast cancer, which is shocking. And like I already mentioned, it's increasing dramatically in Africa. Now, when it comes to research, diagnosis, treatment, post-treatment follow-up between low and high-income countries, there's a huge disparity. And then, in Africa, we focus a lot on infectious diseases. It's not surprising. I mean, we're in the tropics and everything thrives. However, if you look at the epidemiology, there's a huge shift from infectious diseases to non-communicable diseases such as cancers. Unfortunately, we've not really focused on studying such non-communicable diseases. So there's a huge gap in knowledge. So why am I interested in genomics in Africa? Why? Is because breast cancer is a genetic disease. Breast cancer is a genetic disease. I mean, I know you guys, most of you have a science background, so you're pretty familiar with the cell and the chromosomes and the fact that they are made up of long strings of DNA, and you have sections of defined areas that are actually genes. And these genes now produce products, mostly proteins, sometimes functional RNA, that regulate and basically predict your physical appearance and other characteristics, even your risk for cancer. So this image on the side basically shows certain mutations in your DNA can actually result in cancers. Now, I already mentioned cancer is a genetic disease, and the genes involved in this process include genes that, first of all, regulate cell division, proliferation, mitosis. So either they're involved in promoting it or inhibiting it. There should be a balance when it comes to cell proliferation. At a certain point, it needs to stop. So you have genes excuse me, that regulate that. Give me a sec. Take a sip of water. Now, there are genes that control program cell death of apoptosis. And then you also have genes that repair DNA that's damaged. So I know you've heard of BRCA1 and BRCA2 is actually a DNA repair gene. Now, genes belonging to any of these groups are involved in tumorigenesis or carcinogenesis. And depending on how each of them affects cell division, they can be either grouped broadly into tumor suppressor genes or proto-oncogenes. Sorry. So tumor suppressor genes, like the name suggests, they inhibit growth, and the proto-oncogenes promote growth. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with oncogenes. So in its normal state, the genes that promote proliferation are proto-oncogenes. However, when they acquire the necessary mutations for it to overwork or for it to cause overproliferation, then it's now called an oncogene. And the oncogene refers to cancer. Please, I'm in a meeting. I don't work here. Thank you. Sorry, excuse me. I'm at a summit, and then I had to find a quiet area to give my presentation. Now, in a normal cell, you have these tumor suppressor genes. They work and prevent a cell from becoming cancerous. They regulate how the cells divide, when they need to stop. Now, in a cancerous cell, you have all these mutations in these tumor suppressor genes, as well as these oncogenes. And it changes the function of the cell. And it's, even if you look at the structure of the cell, it can change the behavior. Sorry. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, sorry about that. So when you have these mutations, you have a bunch of mutations. It doesn't really require mutation in only one gene. It's a number of genes that work in concert to now cause the cell to transform and become cancerous. And then they become over-proliferative, and then they ignore all these control signals. So then they grow much bigger. So in a situation where you're dealing with breast cancer, a cell acquires all these necessary mutations, and then it starts to proliferate faster. So then now you detect it as a lump, and then it starts to grow bigger. So once it's not taken out, that lump grows bigger, and then starts to spread through the lymph and the bloodstream, and then it establishes in other parts of the body, the liver, the stomach, the brain, and so on and so forth. That's when it becomes difficult to treat it. Now, there's an analogy that has been used to basically describe what an oncogene does. Now, if you look at in the image, you have a vehicle, and the cancer is a wall that the vehicle slams into when it loses control. So that's cancer. So when you have a normal, it's a proto-oncogene when it's normal. It regulates how fast the car goes. Imagine a car that sustains some kind of malfunction. So instead of responding to the pedal, for example, you step on it and then it ends up moving faster. So in this case, moving faster is akin to increased proliferation. And when it moves faster, guess what? It slams into the wall, which represents cancer. So when you have certain mutations in these proto-oncogenes, that cause it to be, now become an oncogene. It has an increased function, and therefore increased proliferation, which is the car that is, has lost control and then slams into the wall. Now, the tumor suppressor gene, they do the opposite. They prevent, they limit how the cells divide. So that here will be represented by the car brakes. Now, when the car brakes, imagine you have two copies of each gene, right? When you're dealing with proto-oncogenes, even a mutation in one, still increases, its activity, leading to, oncogenesis. While the tumor suppressor genes, even imagine you have two breaks. When one fails, the second break still works, right? So for a tumor suppressor gene to contribute to cancer, both copies have to be inactivated. So both breaks will have to be inactivated, right? So even when you have a mutation in an oncogene, that's increasing the speed. As long as you have your breaks working, as long as you have your tumor suppressors working, it does not prevent, you still have control over the car. Now, once you have both breaks not working, your oncogene is working, now the car moves really, really, really fast. And that's a cancer. And then it slumps into the wall, you have cancer. So that's how these tumor suppressor genes and oncogenes work. Now, what are the issues we are dealing with in Africa? When it comes to breast cancer, the data is really scanty. Even when it comes to epidemiology, it's not clear. Certain papers will tell you breast cancer, the subtypes, they have different subtypes, ER plus, PR plus, ER plus, and then triple negative breast cancer, which is the most aggressive type. Now, it's more prevalent in Black women, right? However, the incidence has been over-exaggerated in our part of the world. It's still higher and more associated with Black women, but it's not even clear. Now, when it comes to genomic studies in general, not just with cancer, it's practically non-existent, in Ghana in particular. And if you look at genomic studies around the world, not just in cancers, all other genetic studies, only 2% of Africans have been included in these studies. So, although some of these genetic factors will be shared, because we're all humans, our DNA is at 99.9% identical, it's likely there's some factors that we don't know. And breast cancer is not just genetic disease, it's a complex genetic disease. It's what we call multifactorial. Apart from genetics, the environmental risk factors included that work together to cause cancer. So imagine we are in different environments. There are certain factors that are unknown because you've not studied them. Now, when it comes to genetic diseases, whether complex or Mendelian, what happens is there are some slight peculiarities. It's because these populations have existed in the past, confined, So if there are certain mutations that have arisen or changes in the DNA that have arisen, they are peculiar to those groups. So in the same way, even if we share the same disease, there could be some slight differences. For example, with breast cancer, the breast cancer is more aggressive in Black women. It's more likely to kill Black women. So there are population-specific differences. So if you want to treat a disease, it's better to understand it so you can treat it. So there's a need for population-based studies, and this is lacking in our parts of the world. While we're interested in Africa, like I mentioned, it's a complex tree. The environment is involved, and we are in a different environment. And like I mentioned already, the racial and ethnic differences. And it's more informative to discover the genetic basis of complex traits. Why? Because humans evolved in Africa. It took over 5 million years for modern humans to evolve. And if you evolve in an environment where all humans involve, we are more likely to reveal the genetic basis of complex traits. So we have a unique contribution. Now, a lot of these studies are heavily Eurocentric. Most genomic studies, 78%, are done in Europeans. But if you go back, there's a study known as a genome-wide association study. They've done quite a number of them, white women. Now, when you repeat them, you realize that the regions that were identified, some of these regions that were identified, were not replicated when an African population was used. Now, our second best bet when it comes to genetic data is using African Americans, because we share, our ancestors, but they're still not fully representative of us because they are admixed. They are mixed up with whites and Native Americans, so they're not fully representative of us. So now the chance of identifying new targets, to be able to treat cancer lies in looking into Africa. Now, a study in 2018, just 4 years ago, what they did was they looked at a few hundreds of Africans, and then they sequenced their entire genome, right? And guess what? They found that the reference genome that we currently all using when we look for mutations, we come and compare, to the reference. They found out that there's extra 10% that hasn't been captured in that reference genome. 10% in Africans. Now, when it comes to resources products that are fashioned, for treating, detecting cancers and everything, most of them are in Caucasians, and all the way 99.9% identical. There are some differences. So some of these products are certain drugs, we might not respond to it, or we might have adverse drug response. It is not just the mutations that you find in the cancers. They are the polymorphisms or the differences that you find in genes that even metabolize the drugs. There are differences, okay? Now, this is an image basically showing you the 10% more bases. So the bases and nucleotides that were found in Africans. And they map to all the chromosomes. Some are found in genes in actual fact. Excuse me. So when I mute myself, I just mute myself to cough. Yeah, I have a bad thing. Anyway, now I already mentioned human migration. If you can tell, in Africa, humans evolved here and then it migrated to the rest of the world. So imagine something like this, where the original population of modern humans were, let's say, 1,000. The 1,000 different colors that represents our genetics. So you have 1,000, that's the diversity. A handful are going to migrate out and then repopulate the rest of the world. So now you sequence all these people from, let's say, from Europeans. Guess what? They're still, the genomes arose from the small population that migrated out of Africa. So that, makes sense that when we sequence Africans, there are extra bases that are not present in the reference genome that is being utilized right now. And as you go further away from Africa, the diversity, the genetic diversity changes. So when I talk about genetic diversity, I use an example. For example, when you pick a gene, although we share genes, there's some slight differences called polymorphisms, right? And usually they are called SNPs, single nucleotide changes, right? Now, when you start in East Africa, and as you move away towards Europe, right, you realize that that diversity actually drops significantly, right? It drops significantly. So it tells you that we are the most genetically diverse population. So when it comes to certain diseases like cancers, we are more likely to reveal the genetic basis of that. There's a study where they're looking at cardiomyopathy. They found some mutations, and then when they copy, they checked in Africa, they found that these mutations were benign. They weren't causing any disease. So even now, genetic studies now propose that apart from using the appropriate control, you might want to check the African genome as well to confirm if the mutations you found or polymorphisms you found are associated with the genetic disease that you are studying. Now, so what do I do? So like I mentioned, I'm a geneticist, and what I do now is to can identify, genes that predispose or drive cancers in African women, in Ghanaian women to be precise. So my hypothesis is that there's some unique susceptibility genes that predispose them to breast cancers, and not just unique genes. We'll definitely find genes that are seen in other populations as well. But owing to the fact that we are more genetically diverse, the chances of identifying novel loci is really high. So first of all, to identify genes and pathways that are involved in breast cancer, whether the initiation, the progression, and things like that. And so far, the whole point is to provide a more comprehensive genetic landscape for breast cancer in Africa that can be used to develop resources for detection, therapy, genetic counseling, and so on and so forth in our population. It's going to help with diagnostics, to help, find these molecular markers that can be used for early detection. For prognostics, it can help classify and even predict the clinical outcome. And then for therapeutics, it can be used to find targets for gene therapy, for treatment. Now, at this point, we've collected a few hundreds of samples. We've done some sequencing, and then we've analyzed some of them. I won't go through, all the data we have, but basically, these are a few things that we observed when it came to demographics. African women, and Ghanaian women in particular, tend to get breast cancer at least 10 years younger than their Caucasian counterparts. And this has already been observed, and we've seen it in our cohort as well. So these are some of these population-specific differences that I mentioned. So we get younger than them. And then we also hear it shows that most of us end up going at the late stages. And that's one of the reasons why we tend to die from breast cancer. Like I mentioned, when the cancer starts to spread, it gets really significantly more difficult to treat it. And unfortunately, you have about 70%, 75% of Ghanaian women who go to the hospitals late. Now, when it comes to the grade, there's something called grading, where they observe the cells, the cancer cells under a microscope, and then compare it to the normal epithelial cells. Now, the higher the grade, the more different it is from the natural morphology, and the more aggressive it is. So this is a thing that they've observed in Black women and Ghanaian women in particular. We tend to have high-grade cancer, so then the chances of it spreading or being aggressive is higher. Now, so that's what happens. Now, what happens is the cells, now when you have a mutation that leads to, or the number of mutations that lead to cancer, the sizes tend to grow. And that's when it correlates with the stage number. So it gets bigger and it starts to spread. And by stage 4, it spreads to distant organs. Here you can see it's already in the lungs. And at that point, the treatment, the success of the treatment drops significantly. So for example, stage 0, where you can barely detect it, it's 100%. Stage 1 is up to 98, but then when you get to stage 4, it drops significantly. So then that's why the need to raise breast cancer awareness. So what could be done? I mean, apart from the research, the whole point would be to raise awareness. Because if I remember when I was preparing my proposal for my project, the breast cancer project, right before I moved to Ghana, what struck me in the literature was the late presentation that was leading, contributing significantly to the high mortality rate. I mean, there are other reasons, and that's partly due to low awareness. Because if you are not aware and you find a lump, you probably just hang around. Sometimes it's not even painful. And so you just hang around, let it stay, and then the next thing you know, it's already spread too far. Some of the women go to the hospital. When they're detected, they end up in prayer camps, and then what happens is now the cancer gets the chance to spread. Now, so what's been done right now? So for me, instead of just focusing on the research, I figured one other way to contribute to reducing the mortality rate was to raise breast cancer awareness. So then I came up with the NOFO Festival, and as you can tell, the use represents breasts. So I think the stance we've taken here is not just about preaching the gloom and doom, it can kill you, whatnot, and so on and so forth. We've added a fun twist to it where we try to celebrate breasts. I mean, our species wouldn't exist without breasts, because breasts are important to nourish the young, keep them alive. I mean, even now with formula and so on and so forth, breast milk remains the best nutrition for your baby. So we try to celebrate breasts, let people appreciate their breasts. And when you appreciate something, you tend to take better care of it. You learn how to do your self-breast examinations, and hopefully and then you're aware, and hopefully all these abnormalities will be detected early, and then you can seek early care. So those are some of the things we do. We have all these breast cakes, and it's usually fun. It's usually a hit with people who are attending. And we do go out to different places. It started in 2018, so we just had a fifth, installment of it, and we go out to different areas. We do it at the University of Ghana campus. We do it at the market, Tema Station. Been to the high school this time around, and it's basically to raise breast cancer awareness. We give out gifts and so on and so forth. These are some of my students, not just people in my lab, but people in the departments have come to appreciate it. And usually before October, I have students wanting to put their names down, because you always have to cut off at a certain point. Now, the risk factors are already discussed. So when you look at the risk factors, generally there are certain things that stand out, and being a woman is one of the major risk factors. So being a woman, we talk about breastfeeding and things of that nature. It boils down to hormonal exposure. Being a woman is the biggest risk factor, because 99% of cases are found in women. In men, it's 1%. However, it seems to be higher in Black men, and even more aggressive in Black men. And breast cancer is more likely to kill men because they don't check, because they feel it's a woman's disease. But being a woman is largely due to your estrogen, and exposure to the exposure of the breast to estrogen increases your chances. The breast cells, once you reach puberty, it develops, but it remains immature. It only matures when there's full term pregnancy, when there's breastfeeding. At that point, the breast cells, the mammary glands, are fully mature and start producing breast milk. But outside that time, the breasts every month are exposed to this cyclical rise and fall of female hormones, and they respond to it. You realize the breasts get bigger, so that up and down, change, that response increases your chances of acquiring all these mutations that could eventually lead to cancer. Now, age, why? Because it's a huge factor. Age is more, cancers are more common in older people. Although we have all these checkpoints to identify mutations, that we acquire mutations all the time. So we have all these checkpoints. They'll repair the cells, the genes will repair, or the products of these genes will repair all these mutations and make sure these cells don't divide. Or if they're unable to repair these mutations, they cause the cells to apoptose, right? Or die. Now, all these checkpoints, you still end up accumulating certain mutations. When you pick a cell, you have 6.4 billion bases and nucleotides. Every time it's copied before the cell divides. So there's some mistakes that can be made. And other than that, like I said, we are exposed to a lot of carcinogens and we acquire mutations all the time. But as you get older, some of these mutations will end up accumulating. And if you get the right set of mutations, then it can cause cancer. That's why age is a big factor. Family history has to do with the fact that you share more genes with your family members. So if you have multiple people in your family having breast cancer, especially at younger ages, that's indicative of a familial component. So then your chances are a little elevated. So you need to show, and that ties the same with genetics. If, for example, if close family members and identified with a certain mutation that predisposes you to breast cancer, like the BRCA1, BRCA2 mutation, then your chances are higher, especially if you check and you find a mutation. Personal history of breast cancer, if you had it before, your chances of having it get higher. If you receive certain radiations for lymphoma treatment when you were younger, at the point where your breast cells were still active, right? Then, radiation can induce certain mutations. And then, so if some of them are retained, then your chances of getting breast cancer goes up. Now, certain breast changes, some people acquire all these other abnormalities like benign tumors and things like that. And those sometimes predispose you to getting, cancer as well. Race, ethnicity. So, although breast cancer is more common in certain populations, your race might have a more aggressive form, like in Black people, right? We might have more aggressive form, but they're supposed to have. It seems that we have lower incidence of breast cancer in our population. However, it's going up. Being overweight. So the fat cells are known to produce a certain amount of estrogen. So if you're overweight, it means you're producing more. So the chances, it can increase your chance. Pregnancy history. When you get pregnant and you had children, had multiple children. When you're pregnant, your breast cells mature. They mature, so they are not exposed, and you're not menstruating, so your breast cells are not exposed to that cyclical rise and fall. So there are chunks of periods where your breast cells are just mature. Someone will say they don't misbehave, they don't have time to misbehave. The same for breastfeeding history. If you breastfeed at least for a year, the breast cells are busy in quotes producing breast milk and wouldn't have time to be misbehaving or being responsive to the rise and fall of hormones that come with your menstrual period. Same with menstrual history. If you started your menarche early, maybe really early, then your breast will have had a much longer period to be exposed to estrogen. So your chances go up a bit. Using hormone replacement therapy after menopause. It comes with a lot of side effects, the hot flashes and so on and so forth. Some can be pretty severe. So then you are given estrogen, progesterone as replacement to forestall these side effects. Now, because you are being exposed to these hormones, it does increase your chances. Drinking alcohol, for example, alcohol is metabolized. So some of the intermediate metabolites can actually form adducts, the DNA fragments. And so when you form adducts with DNA fragments, it increases the chances of the DNA breaking and the chances of acquiring certain mutations. Now, and then acquiring mutations that could lead to cancer. Now, the lack of exercise. If you don't work out, then that translates to maybe not having a healthy, weight and being overweight, obesity, and all that, and not being active. Generally, wreaks havoc on your immune system. So not exercising can, affect you. Smoking. Cigarette smoke contains hundreds, about 400 carcinogens. So being exposed to smoke can cause all these mutations that can increase your chance. And like Dr. Grace Kelly, I can't get the name right, mentioned earlier, some of them have higher intermediate or moderate to low risk. So, but some of them, like being a woman, is one of the biggest risk factors you can have, because 99% of the time, breast cancer is going to be a woman. So ultimately, the whole point of raising awareness is for early detection, and we all know once it's not taken out early enough and it starts to spread, it becomes very difficult to treat it. Because at that point, single cells break off and then they establish in distant organs. So then it becomes, almost impossible to treat the person. So I guess one of the take-home messages, one is a genetic disease, and then early detection saves lives. So I'd like to acknowledge. So if you've noticed, we have had different group pictures, this from the different years, and these are members of my lab, and some of them from different labs, like I mentioned. And Claudia here is one of the people who's doing the analysis and the sequencing. People have worked on different parts of the different projects. Apart from the genetics, I'm looking at other risk factors like HPV and so on and so forth. I work on different cancers as well. And I'm also acknowledge these people who helped with the NUFO Fest this year. Of course, we have the University of Ghana, have WAGBIP, who's staunchly behind this and big on public engagement, have frequent labs. And we usually get the nurses and doctors through that NGO to provide a free breast screening to the men and women who visit us when we go on the road to raise cancer awareness. And this OWSD is a grant I have with the Organization for Women in Science for the Developing World, UNESCO. And I put some money aside for this. The Little Car is a marketing company that's also supported. March is a biotech company. I'm actually the director of genetics research there. It's a new company in Ghana. We're interested in cancer genomics. We're hoping to maybe help identify, all these new biomarkers that are peculiar to Africans, not just Ghanaians, but Africans in general, that can be used for therapy and diagnosis and, prognosis and so on and so forth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lily. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Dr. Lily? Because she really has said a lot. So please voice out your questions, or you can type them in the chats and I'll read them out to everyone's hearing. Okay, Kelvin Townsend has a hand up. So let's hear you, Kelvin.
So, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Premka, for this wonderful presentation. So, my question has to do with the alarming increase of transgender. So, in some of their procedures, we realize that some of them have to inject synthetic hormones and all that, which are all predisposing factors to some of these cancers. So, what do you think the science community should do in response to this trend coming up, which is actually increasing the risk of getting certain cancers? Because now we are seeing some of these breast cancers in males who have now become females because of some of things like this. So what do you think, what do you suggest the science community or we upcoming should do that it will not be also offensive to their, in quotes, sexual orientation?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Yeah, you're right about this. In males who get breast cancer, one of their risk factors is exposure or having a higher level of estrogen, or having taken, estrogen or estrogen-like compounds to treat maybe prostate cancer. It does increase the chance of getting breast cancer. However, when you talk about people becoming, so here talking about male to female, so transgender females, right? Is that what you meant?
Yes, please. Yes.
At the end of the day, it's such a dicey area, really sensitive area, and someone who feels that they are females in a male body, and the only way out is to undergo, a sex change and start taking hormones, and it'll be hard to, stop them. It'll be hard to stop them because one of the major things you need to do if you want to undergo sex change is to go on, estrogen-like hormones to induce all these other female characteristics, and that's what makes them happy. At the end of the day, if they're going to increase their chances of getting breast cancer, we are females, we don't have a choice. So I guess our chances are still going to be higher, I think. But if they want to become females, I guess it will come with a risk factor that comes, breast cancer risk factor that comes with which comes with being a female. And I think the biggest issue here will be what should women who need to take, hormone replacement therapy post-menopause should do. I know usually they have talked about, with their doctors, weigh the pros and cons, maybe reduce the amount or stick to maybe a lower amount of estrogen. They have to weigh the pros and cons. Like I mentioned, it could be very severe, the effects. But when it comes to, people transitioning, I think you can't really stop them. And I feel the other way around, if you look at trans men who've now taken off their breasts and are taking testosterone and whatnot, I think they'll probably reduce their chances of getting breast cancer. I pretty believe that. So I guess it's a trade-off. If you want to become a female, it comes with the territory. You have to deal with it. And as scientists, I would think maybe somewhere down the line, if they're able to, modify the synthetic hormones to the point where they are not, they are more selective and wouldn't increase your chances of getting, but maybe somewhere down there, someone can figure out something like that. I think it should be something that we should be looking at.
Thank you, Dr. Lily.
Thank you, Doctor.
Amy wants to know that what do you think about the ongoing conception that sucking breasts reduces a woman's chances of developing breast cancer, and whether it is true or false?
All right, thanks. So sucking breast by whom? The only scientifically proven breast sucking that can reduce your chances of getting breast cancer is breastfeeding a baby. Because at that point, the breast cells are fully mature and producing breast milk. So during those chunks of time, and then at least, if you can do it for at least 1 year, your chances of getting breast cancer is reduced. So if you're able to do that, like I said, the breast cells are mature and busy, too busy to be exposed to that cyclical rise and fall of the monthly hormone. So then it reduces your chances of doing that. So if you have multiple children, in addition to all this pregnancy, it will help reduce your chance. But mind you, all these no risk factors. Someone will have a family history, might have BRCA 1 or 2 mutation, might be smoking, drinking, obese, doesn't work out, female, old, might not get breast cancer. And someone who doesn't take any of the doses can also get breast cancer. 90% of breast cancer cases are sporadic mutations. Basically, mutations that you acquire just by being alive. 10% of them are what we call familial or hereditary breast cancer. That one, you inherit maybe a mutation in one of the tumors of breast gene, like, BRCA. So then your chances of getting breast cancer is higher. That's why when you see families that have BRCA mutation, they get that at an earlier age. I mentioned with the tumor suppressors, both copies need to be inactivated. So even if you are born with one, the second in a particular cell has to be inactivated. But the chances of that happening is higher if every cell already has one, faulty brake. Imagine all the cars there have one faulty brake. Getting a second brake randomly will be higher. So you have the accidents happening earlier. But in a situation where you've not inherited any mutation, right? All the cars on the road have 2 working brakes. The chances of one having one malfunctioning and getting a second one malfunctioning is higher. So then you end up getting breast cancer at a later age. But those with a mutation already get it at an earlier age. However, like I said, the sporadic ones that happen by chance, it's in over 90% of the breast cancer cases.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lily. Amy also wants to know, what can the science community do about the fact that the breast cancer conception, what can the science community do about it as it overshadows the real motive of the Breast Cancer Awareness Month?
About the breast sucking?
Yes, please.
Yes, so like I mentioned, I know that people are always talking about men sucking breast. Unfortunately, I feel it's men just get excited about breast and nipples. So when you mention it, that's the first thing that strikes them. So you'd be surprised someone says something like that and it goes viral. But when they're sending home the message, then they're not that interested. But they get interested when you talk about nipples. I feel like the way to go about it is to just tie it in. And it's definitely going to be here. People are going to bring it up every time. But it's the best way is to now, try and drive home the message we're actually going to send, so that it, eventually overshadows this nonsense that, this tries to overshadow the real message. But I feel at the end of the day, they end up getting the message. They do end up getting the message, but I guess it's a bit of fun for them to focus on, the sexual part of it, because, let's face it, people they'll be excited about breasts. But anyway, can also encourage them it should help your wives know their breasts as well, or know your wife's breast. So then there's something abnormal, I can also help identify it. But I feel like the message is to drive home the message you want to send. Keep hammering on it so that they still get it. Even though they are distracted by, all these other messages, they just drive home this message. And I know they know the fact, but it's just fun to, I guess, talk about it. So they go on and on and on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. Please, I also want to know, October 13 every year is known as New Blood Day. So I want to know, what is the significance and what has when the breast got to do with?
I think it just has to do with, basically it's raising breast cancer awareness. I think it just has to do with the attention that it gets. The same thing. Right off what we just discussed, everybody gets excited about breast. So knowing that, people are walking around feeling without breasts, it's just fun for people. But I think the whole point of that day is to just raise breast cancer awareness. That's the whole point of it. because it garners a lot of attention. You know, when they talk about no bra, people are all excited. But that's basically is raising breast cancer awareness and then encouraging women to check their breasts for abnormalities. Take off the bra, you check.
Okay, so the bra has nothing to do with breast cancer susceptibility, not even the silicone or the metal that makes up the bra.
No, there's not. There's no known scientific study that clearly shows there's a link to wearing breast cancer. Sorry, wearing bras. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Has anyone else got any question? Okay, so from the organizers, there's supposed to be an airtime giveaway to participants who asked questions or answered certain questions. So I'll be reading out 5 questions, and the people who get them will get the airtime. And these questions are most best answered. It will be best if you answer the question by unmuting yourself, because if you type it and then I don't see it early, I may not be able to judge who answered it first and who answered it correctly. So the first question is that our species can exist without breasts. True or false? Hello, did everybody get the question? Okay, the question again. Our species can exist without breasts. True or false?
Good question. Do you want to qualify it? Like say now or in the past?
Probably generally.
Okay.
And it's to the participant, not the experts, please.
Oh no, I'm not answering. Don't worry.
Thank you very much. Oh, no one is answering it. Okay, I take it that no one is going to answer, so I'll move on to the next 4 questions. The second question is that African women, especially Ghanaian women, get breast cancer some years earlier than their Caucasian counterparts. How many years is it? How many years earlier do African women get breast cancer than their Caucasian counterparts? Okay, no one is answering. You can type it if you're feeling too shy. Otherwise, I'll have to move on to the other 3 questions and then just end the seminar. So the second question again is, how many years earlier do African women, especially Ghanaian women, get breast cancer than their Caucasian counterparts? Okay, someone has answered, no, it's not 5 years. According to Dr. Lily, she didn't mention 5 years, so please try again. Salasi, you can try again. Okay, a third question from Dr. Grace's submission. If a breast lump is not a cancerous lump, what other thing could it possibly be? If a breast lump is not a cancerous lump, what other thing could it possibly be? Okay, so Selassie got it correct. She mentioned a cyst. Selassie mentioned a cyst. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's a she or a he. So please send me your phone number and then we'll send it to you right away. Moving on to the fourth question. Is breast cancer a genetic disease? Okay, Rachel also got it. Breast cancer is a genetic disease, so please send your phone number as well. And the last question. Why are men more likely to get breast cancer? Or why are men more at risk of getting breast cancer than women?
They're more likely to die or more at risk of dying, not getting.
Okay, yes, please. So the question again, why are men more at risk of dying of breast cancer than women? Okay, so that question was also not answered. So that's the end of the questions. So we'll send the airtime to the winners in a few minutes.
All right, so Counselor, thank you very much for hosting the show, this webinar. Next on the program, we are supposed to have a closer remarks from our president, Stanley Samosaki, but he's currently unavailable, so I'll just do that in his stead. First, we want to thank all our speakers from Dr. Grace to Dr. Lily. We've actually been on their necks and then worrying them every day. Dr. Grace, please, how do you are you ready? Do you how do you want? How should we do this? How should we do that? Dr. Lily every day texting them, calling them, and then we are so grateful that they've actually taken part in this webinar and they've taught us a lot. And I'm very much aware that we've all learned something new. And then we have taken something with us. And I'm aware the low turnout is mainly because of the vocational training that is going on. So people are being occupied all over. But the meeting has been recorded, so it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, the GAMBIMBS YouTube channel, for anyone to access at any time. And all those who joined in want to say a very big thank you to Councillor too for doing a very good job in hosting. So I think there's a hand up there. Hello. MFI, I saw your hand up. Do you have something to add? Okay, bye, Dr. Lily. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. We are very grateful.
You're welcome. All right, bye.
Bye.